February 13th, 26, and Britain's richest person who lives in Monaco to avoid, well, not to avoid, to not pay as much tax, even though obviously he feels he hasn't got enough money and that, so anyway, he's got himself in real trouble because on Sky News it has some sort of economic thing. He made a statement, I don't even know if I can say it on YouTube, but anyway, something like Britain has been colonised. To me, that means that that word means that settlers have come and changed the demographic of a country. I'll check up and see actually what the meaning is. I've just checked Gemini for an explanation, but it says common types: settler, colonisation, exploitation, or surrogate. So it depends what one. I would think settler is what we're talking about here. Large numbers of people moved to the new land, eventually seeking to replace their original population, e.g. historical woke examples in Australia or North America. And how did that work out for Australia and North America? Are those countries considered desirable? Do people from many parts of the world want to move there? Do people from many parts of the world rule out many continents, or they're definitely not going to live where they're from? They're going to move. Do they rule out many continents when they're considering moving? Do they only think of a few? Where are Australia and North America on that list? So that's the one. So it could be other types, like focuses less on settlement, add more on controlling resources and labour through a small administrative elite. Well, you could say, yeah, the British in India, but we don't know whether that was India's best years, and if we left a good social and physical infrastructure there. Ben Habib says that he was born in Pakistan in 65 and he lived there to about 79, and he said it still felt quite a good place, I think he said, but then you start feeling they were moving away from sort of Western influence. I don't know how people feel about moving to Pakistan now. Surrogate: a colonial power supports a settlement project by a different group that is not its own ethnic majority. So I guess we're all talking about different things here, but I think most of us are thinking of settler type. And one of my points would be, I thought immigration and open borders is a good thing, so shouldn't the left be saying it's a good thing and promoting it that way rather than castigating Mr. Ratcliffe? And then we've got our useless, duplicitous Prime Minister saying, offensive and wrong, Britain is a proud, tolerant and diverse country. And this is a man who last year said that last May said we were an island of strangers, and people said it echoed the speech made in 1969. I would say it was the best speech on this subject since then, and it made him more in touch with Reform voters than Reform at the time. But then a month later he said he regretted making the speech, so I think he was trying to get both sides. He was trying to get a go. But I mean, Keir Starmer's the only dislikable Prime Minister I know of. The way he doesn't, in his biography he'll say how terrible Donald Trump was as a person, etc. But he's doing the same thing to him as he did to Corbyn, where he just keeps quiet and sucks up. He gave him a second state visit, that sort of thing. He's doing the same thing, and then he totally turned on Jeremy Corbyn here. And here's an interesting thing. And here's Starmer's landslide election compared to Corbyn's votes in 2017 and 2019. So Starmer get the lowest of the three. Corbyn get 12.9 million in 2017, 10.3 in 2019, which I think Starmer calls Labour's low point. And then Starmer get 2/3 of the seats with 9.7 million. Starmer's got no plans to give us proportional representation or anything like that. So, yeah, and he's just said this week in Prime Minister's Questions, I got rid of our former leader as if that was a good thing, and you can compare the voter turnout, and you can see the Tory vote, you know, in the Gemini definition of colonisation. I just noticed at the bottom there, cultural displacement. Colonisation frequently involves the imposition of the coloniser's language, religion. Well, in this case, colonisers would be very many different ones. So this is a unique type, and there used to be, I think there used to be adverts on the London Underground about reverse colonisation. Let's see. Yeah, there's adverts in the London Underground. So, featuring a poem that refers to immigration as colonising in reverse. It's not a new corporate ad campaign, but rather a recent flare-up of a long-standing cultural debate centred around a famous poem by the Jamaican artist Lowe Bennett Coverley, Miss Lowe. The phrase comes from the 1966 poem Colonisation in Reverse, written to mark the arrival of the Windrush generation in Britain. So that was the first, really, well, them and South Asians at the time, back in 1948, the Caribbean. And we don't know if the Caribbean Brits, if in a referendum to deport newcomers from other parts of the world, we don't know what the Caribbean Brits would vote in that. So the original intent, Miss Lowe used the term satirically and ironically to describe Jamaicans moving to England for work. She framed it as a turnabout where the formerly colonised were now settling in the land of the coloniser. And my question is, why would you want to settle in the land of the coloniser? If you look at Jamaica and Britain, personally, my thought is, if we're all the same, then we're going to move towards warm weather and beautiful scenery as well. That's what we're going to move to. I think that any society can easily build a flourishing economy now, if that's what it's all about. China's the second biggest economy now, but Chinese still seem to be moving away from China, especially millionaires, funnily enough, as Nigel Farage said, that Britain's second only after China in terms of millionaires moving, I think it was. But my question would be, why are the millionaires moving from China? And so, in modern controversy, yeah, people are using it. Images of these posters, which are part of various arts of the underground or whatever, are circulating on X, etc. So, yeah, we've got this. Why would colonisers want to move to a cold, wet, windy coloniser country? It's like me wanting to move to Germany in 1941 or something like that. If you sort of, I've not thought of a really good analogy for that, but is it an official ad? TfL, Transport for London, frequently runs Art on the Underground campaigns that highlight Black history, diaspora narratives and historic poetry. So it's Transport for London. You could say it's the government, really, or the local government that's running such ads. I mean, really, Britain, because of wokeness, has become like Saddam's Iraq when it comes to free speech, or Putin's Russia, anywhere you want to call Stasi of East Germany. I mean, the woke police state, really, we have. It is ironic because the woke are also the ones who brought us cancel culture, but ironically, the establishment cancels them on Palestine, and probably other things as well. So they're getting cancelled as well because that culture's come in. But the woke really are the arbiters of cancel culture and Stasi-like woke police state. And thank goodness we've got reform now, because imagine we didn't have reform. Because Mr Ratcliffe apologised, unfortunately. I mean, I think possibly because Man United aren't happy about it. But at least thank God we've got reform who haven't apologised and have taken it. And probably Zia Yusuf is one of the ones who's insisting they keep on not apologising. Thank goodness for that. But I mean, probably Nigel himself, but he's saying here 1 million people living in Britain don't speak English. Areas of our towns and cities have been completely changed. Jim Ratcliffe is right. And to show how wokeness has taken over, well, for the last 25, 30 years, I think Prevent is some sort of, it's meant to be a terrorist Prevent thing. Prevent people going on that path, apparently. I think originally it was set up because of things to do with, the Manchester bombing and things to do where Allah Akbar probably gets thinged. But now, probably to make it look not our word or whatever, or ethnic word, they put in a lot of far right stuff as well, or what they consider far right. And to me, it looks as if Mr Ratcliffe and Nigel Farage, who could be the next, it's probably going to be the next Prime Minister, could get referred to our Prevent thing, That's the ridiculous situation we're in. And I'd be interested to who comes up with these categories. I would like to know the panel. I think we need to know the panel who make these up, and also who's in charge of the panel. And we need to have names associated with these things, because they don't make sense, basically. So how Prevent views the narrative of colonisation. Concept: UK is being colonised. Prevent's perspective: classified as a conspiracy theory or extremist grievance. Why is a concern? It can lead to radicalisation by making violence seem like self-defence. Where it comes from: often linked to extreme right-wing or identitarian movements. The goal of Prevent: to use early intervention to challenge these views before they lead to crime. So really, I mean, at the moment, Nigel Farage, our next Prime Minister, plus our richest industrialist, our richest person, could be referred to the Prevent programme. And to give you other ideas from the likes of, we've got the NHS saying that there's pregnant people. You have to I'll need to think up my words. Wait a minute. You have to refer to the pregnant as pregnant people. So whoever came up with that woke government rule, I think they need to have a name associated with it, because we need to understand their thinking. It's the same as any government bill. It needs to be associated with the name of the person in charge, so that we understand this is this person who brought this through. So anyway, my thought would be, is it a bad thing, because everyone seems to be acting, especially the Labour, Tories and the far left, seem to be acting as if a bad thing has been said, whereas the Mayor of London continually says we need more immigration, we've not got enough, it needs to be faster, etc. As far as I know, would that not be settler changing the country with settlement? Is that colonisation? Is it a bad thing? Everybody seems to be working on as if it's a bad thing, either consciously or subconsciously. Because people who feel that it's a good thing, or changing the demographics is a good thing, should be happy, proud to go on about it, So this has all happened because our richest person, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, the billionaire founder of INEOS and co-owner of Man United, sparked a major controversy by claiming the UK has been colonised by immigrants. The comments were made during a Sky News interview on Wednesday, February 11th, 26, where Ratcliffe discussed the UK economy, welfare, dependency and immigration. And he said, you can't have an economy with 9 million people on benefits and huge levels of immigrants coming in. I mean, the UK has been colonised. It's costing too much money. The UK has been colonised by immigrants, really, hasn't it? And the Sky News interviewer sort of interrupted him here to say, surprised that he used that word. And then Jim sort of looked, have I got myself in trouble here? But then he doubled down on it. Then the next day he apologised. But Nigel Farage stepped in anyway and says, and I think Rupert Lowe as well. So thank goodness we're getting reform to give that point of view, you know. And it's up to voters if they want to vote them, you know. It looks as if a lot of Labour voters are now voting reform. It looks as if I saw Zach Polanski in a ex-post today or yesterday saying, don't think that the reform voters are bad. I mean, why not? If you're saying that reform are this and that, and these people are voting them, why are you saying the voters? It's because they need them. Basically, they need voters. So, but it's the same as there was an MP during Tommy's March last year in October, or Tommy's get-together in London, where anything like, the police said there was maybe 125,000, Ben Habib reckons about 500,000, others think about 1 million, and that was from something that wasn't advertised in mainstream media, and it meant people from all over the country had to get there early. So, yeah, there was one MP saying that he usually calls these sort of get-togethers the R word. But at this one, he saw some of his constituents that he knew, and he was thinking, well, these people aren't R word. You know, either they are or they aren't, you know. If they're there, and you're saying that to go to that march is R word, either they are or aren't, or does it matter anyway, or, you know, is it a one-way thing, you know, because I'll show you the immigration policies of some of the countries people are coming from, you know, see how they feel about immigration and asylum, etc. Yeah, so he made this point, and then he backtracked the next day. And he also used figures. He said that UK population grew from 58 million in 2020 to 70 million today, which is incorrect. It was actually 67 million in 2020. And to me, that was sloppy, you know. Although even 67 to 70 is a lot. I mean, we've had the Boris waves, which were the biggest of all time. Change waves. So how sloppy about that? I mean, it told me a bit about him rather than what he was actually saying. I mean, I think his point was totally spot on, but the fact that he gets such simple figures wrong tells me about him, a little bit about him, you know, because to me he looks, you know, I don't know, I'm just talking about first impression, looks a sort of difficult guy, although I don't know really. He's got his INEOS products in the supermarkets now, you know, it's in detergent aisle, you've got washing powder, clothes washing powder, you've got stuff to clean your floors, and I think he's actually sort of trying to use his plastics because he's in the oil refinery business, and he's looking for more markets for that probably. And maybe he was hoping that INEOS brand takes off. Maybe that'll be the end of it now, we don't know, but or maybe it'll be some love it and some don't now. It'll be a sort of Marmite brand now, maybe. But yeah, but I'm not really bothered about him at the moment. I'm just bothered about, I feel that what he says, it's good that Nigel Farage has in Reform are saying this thing, because Reform are currently the most popular political party in Britain, at around about 32%. Labour are way down 20%, and find out now they're like 14 or 16%. Find out now polls, which I think is probably more accurate. Yeah, and it just is bizarre that Labour and Tory, etc. I mean, LabCon have created the current situation from 1948 onwards. We never get a referendum on the issue at any point. We've only had 4 referendums since the war, World War II, 1 for joining the EEC, the European Economic Community, and 3 under David Cameron because he thought there were things that he could get massive majorities in, and so it was a no-brainer because you would have sort of moral backing. And of course, he lost the last one, and he nearly lost the Scottish one as well. So he's the only referendum Prime Minister we've had, really. We could have a referendum on this issue now. That's what Keir Starmer could do. Yeah, so that word, and it makes me wonder where the mainstream media are at the moment, because are they not looking at the political polls? And have they checked the council by-elections every Thursday? Reform are trouncing Labour areas, you know. Well, last week in a Plaid Cymru area, Holyhead in Anglesey, the island, probably a very Welsh area, about 17% Welsh speakers, I think, or something. Reform came from nowhere to 51% of the vote in a council by-election, you know, and that's a Plaid Cymru area, I think. So, yeah, they just seem to be, well, the mainstream media seem unaware, and the Labour and Tory are just going on as if nothing's changed, because it's not another. The general election's not meant to be 2029 because we've not got a very good democracy, and they have 5-year gaps, whereas in Australia they have 3-year gaps. I don't believe in a democracy anyway. It should be like the Swiss electoral system where they have referendums all the time. Quarterly referendums. There's 8 coming up in March, and they're having one in immigration in June. So, yeah, just looking at this again. Yeah, the Prime Minister described his remarks as offensive and wrong. The England rugby captain, Maro Itoje, said they called the comments ridiculous and far from the truth. I mean, if you think of settler colonisation, and this is a unique type, because in the old days it may have been one group coming in. This time it's from many places in the world, seemingly where the people don't want to live. And we don't know what countries or continents they may be ruled out when they were considering moving. So, yeah, the Football Association reportedly began looking into whether comments brought the game into disrepute. I mean, people who agree with them or whatever should need to switch to reform, whether you're Labour, SNP, Greens. You need to switch to reform. You need to think of the electoral system as a referendum on the issue, basically, because the woke, you've got 2 levels. You've got the far left woke, and then you've got the inbuilt woke of Labour, Conservative. They're totally, I don't know, they've created a Stasi state, basically. And Ratcliffe, on the next day, February 12th, Ratcliffe issued a statement expressing regret for his choice of language. He apologised for offending people in the UK and Europe, but maintained that it was important to raise the issue of controlled and well-managed immigration to support economic growth. I think in our areas, I don't know about INEOS, where they have a lot of low-level jobs. They probably do, but maybe in highly skilled and maybe low-level, as a corporation, they might need a lot of, or they might desire a lot of overseas thing. A lot of countries like Dubai, I think 95% of their country is non-native, but the people don't get citizenship, you know, whereas once moving to Britain, the norm is you get citizenship, basically. Nobody knows why. You don't get it, I think, in Singapore and places like that. In fact, most places, like South Asia or... whereas in the West, you're expecting to get citizenship, especially under a left government. So, I mean, the Workers' Party aren't in favour of the current thing. They're one of the strictest on it, I think. Critics have noted the irony of the comments, pointing out that Ratcliffe moved his own tax residency to Monaco in 2020, and that his company INEOS has received significant state aid from the UK and EU governments. That doesn't put me off what he's saying, though, you know. I think, you know, 'cause, you know, I think, you know, 'cause, 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 you know Because it seems that a lot of corporations probably want immigration as cheap labour, basically, or even at the higher level, they just want the instantly brightest, as they would think. Or maybe they see ones coming in from another country easier to work with, I don't know, for a while. My question would be about the highly skilled ones. Shouldn't the left be saying this is brain drain from the countries they're coming from? I mean, that's how I see it. Why? First of all, why don't these people want to stay where they are? A lot of them is probably beautiful, warm countries, maybe a homogenous country. Why do they want to come to Britain or America or whatever? And don't forget, in terms of colonisation, settler colonisation, Britain, you could say, colonised America, Australia, New Zealand, Canada. I don't know how desirable those countries are considered now and to people around the world in terms of moving to. We don't know why people are moving away from their own countries, but we don't know if those countries are highly desirable and if maybe that's the only countries they want to move to, or maybe West Europe. We don't know. So we've got that. That was settler colonisation. Britain didn't settle or colonise very many countries around the world that it ruled. We don't know if those were the best years for those countries in terms of stability, flourishing. We've got Zimbabwe. I think Zimbabwe, the supposed oppressed people, make up one of the big chunks of our asylum process group, and also social work visas and things like that. And it's a beautiful country. Yeah. So that's the sort of idea. I think South Africa, the quote oppressed of South Africa, I think make up quite a bit of people moving to Britain as well. So it doesn't really make sense in terms of we're all equals or whatever. So yeah. So does INEOS want immigrants for its workforce? It looks to me like this is saying not in the way I thought. I thought he might at the bottom end he might want a lot. You've got the high end and the bottom end. So he's got 26,000 employees across 29 countries. Meritocracy. The company explicitly states it is a meritocracy that welcomes talent first and foremost, emphasising that diversity of thought is essential for its success in the competitive global chemical industry. International mobility. For high-level roles, its graduate programme specifically looks for candidates who are mobile around Europe and the UK, often moving staff across international borders to fill specialised engineering, etc. Visa sponsorship limits. INEOS is selective about who they will sponsor for visas. Get the graduate level there. European Commercial Graduate Programme typically does not consider applicants who require sponsorship to work in the UK or Europe. Specialised roles. For direct entry roles, typically experienced engineers or specialists, they do provide sponsorship on a case-by-case basis when the specific technical requirements for the position cannot be met by the local labour market. Back to Keir Starmer, just to show you. I mean, the guy doesn't make any sense. He's like Trump. One day he says one thing, one day he says the other. To me, he seems an intolerant guy, sort of authoritarian. That's what he actually lies. Same as sort of Trump. He doesn't see himself like Trump. He sees himself as the opposite. But yeah, and somehow he's ended up on the left. I don't know why. But here's quotes from his speech last year on immigration last May. It was a highly controversial speech at a press conference for the Immigration White Paper. The speech was criticised by several Labour MPs and human rights groups, who accused him of using rhetoric that echoed Nigel Farage or even Enoch Powell's Rivers of Blood speech. So here we go, key quotes. Now in a diverse nation like ours, and I celebrate that, these rules become even more important. Without them, we risk becoming an island of strangers, not a nation that walks forward together. on integration and language, but when people come to our country, they should also commit to integration, to learning our language, and our system should actively distinguish between those that do and those that don't. Criticism of the previous policy, and this was Boris Johnson's policy, the open border experiment, which is what Keir Starmer's calling it. So, does that mean we're allowed to call it an open border experiment, the Boris waves? Or are we all going to get referred to Prevent, even though the Prime Minister in charge of Prevent said it? A one-nation experiment in open borders conducted on a country that voted for control, well, no more. Taking back control is a Labour argument. On economic addiction to cheap labour. So when you have an immigration system that seems almost designed to permit abuse, that encourages some businesses to bring in lower paid workers rather than invest in our young people, you're actually contributing to the forces that are slowly pulling our country apart. Future hardline stance. If we do need to take further steps, if we do need to do more to release pressure on housing and our public services, then mark my words, we will. So you get a lot of backlash for that, of course, but he's the Prime Minister, so he's not going to get referred to Prevent or get the police round his house or whatever. And then, of course, a month later he said he regretted it, so that's him. He feels probably he's winning both sides, but he's actually losing both sides. Yes, Keir Starmer eventually expressed deep regret, apparently, for the language used in that speech, though not immediately. While his team initially stood by the remarks, Starmer pivoted a few weeks later in a candid interview with The Observer in June 25. He admitted that the phrase "island of strangers" was a mistake. Why he regretted it? Starmer's regret was centred on two main factors. The Enoch Powell comparison. He admitted he was unaware that the phrase echoed Enoch Powell's 68 Rivers of Blood speech, where Powell claimed the British would become strangers in their own country. I wouldn't have used those, here's his quote, I wouldn't have used those words if I had known they were, or even would be, interpreted as an echo of Powell. I had no idea, and my speech writers didn't know either. But that particular phrase, no, it wasn't right. But is it not that they both came to those conclusions because that's the way logic is going to take you? Is that not what it says? And he says he was in a state of high distress during the press conference. Just hours before the speech, there had been an alleged arson attack on his family home in Kentish Town. He admitted he was really shaken up and almost cancelled the event. I mean, for such an important speech, you would think, well, cancel it then, if you're that shaken up, you know. Here's what he says, I'll give you the honest truth. I deeply regret using it. It's fair to say I wasn't in the best state to make a big speech. I should have read the speech more carefully and held it up to the light a bit more. And how do his speech writers feel? I mean, he's told them to make a speech on it. They've done that. And then a month later he's saying he regrets the speech. I wonder if it was McSweeney that made up the speech. I don't know. But he always does U-turns. So despite his apology for the language, he did not retract the underlying policy shift. This led to a double-sided criticism. From the left, many felt the apology was too little too late. From the right, figures like Nigel Farage mocked the regret, calling it absolute proof that Keir Starmer has no beliefs and just reads from a script. And I totally agree, although I would say he does have beliefs, but they're sort of authoritarian. He's right, you know. It's sort of meant to be, even though, as Anna Sarwar said this week, as he said Keir Starmer should go, he said he makes too many mistakes. So it wasn't just the Mandelson thing Sarwar was saying. He was saying he makes too many mistakes. And that's exactly right, because the guy's incompetent. But he's got a sort of an air of competence. You know, he's got a sort of Dilbert air about him or something. So we should be judging him the other way around, where he's like somebody who makes mistakes, who's got an aloofness about him. You know, that's what we should be thinking. Rather than somebody who makes individual mistakes but is very competent. Just to give you an idea, I think when we talk about immigration and asylum, we should look at the policies of the countries around the world. So we've got some here. Middle East, their logic for their immigration policy, preserving tribal wealth and status. For the Maldives, it's religious belief, maintaining 100% Sunni Muslim identity. In practice, I wonder how that works, Africa, Liberia, I think this was a country created by the Quakers because they expected slaves, once they were liberated in America, would want to go back to Africa or something. I don't know, you'll need to check that up. Primary barrier here in Liberia, racial descent. The logic, Negro descent only, constitutional racial barrier. And in India, I don't think this is as simple as it looks. Religious minority status, sanctuary for non-Muslim minorities. But I think they mean local, ones that ended up in Pakistan or whatever after Britain drew lines. And Pakistanis seem happy with the lines that, well, not totally, but I think they're quite happy that Britain created Pakistan. We didn't include Bangladesh, and that had a war. Just back to the previous ones. Well, the global trend is towards global citizenship. I don't know about that. These regions are doubling down on sovereign identity. In 2026, we see a slight softening in the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia to attract elite talent, but for the average person, the blood barrier remains the highest hurdle. Just looking at these again. In South Asia, the Middle East and Africa, ethnocentric immigration policies often reflect a desire to preserve religious identity, tribal lineage. I would say tribal is the way most would go, or historical, cultural homogeneity. Here's a big part, while Western nations often move toward merit-based systems, or we have since 1948. I don't think it's even merit-based, actually. It's just anyone can come, really. Many countries in these regions remain committed to citizenship by blood over citizenship by birth. So it's blood citizenship in these countries, it seems. The Middle East, the Gulf model of lineage, so Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Oman, Bahrain, have some of the world's most ethnocentric citizenship laws. They are designed to protect the rentier state, benefits for a small indigenous population, paternal lineage. Citizenship is almost exclusively passed down through the father. In countries like Kuwait and Qatar, a woman married to a foreigner often cannot pass her nationality to her children, effectively keeping the citizen class restricted to specific tribal bloodlines. Naturalisation barriers, even for individuals born in these countries who have lived there for 40 plus years, naturalisation is extremely rare and usually requires a special decree from the monarch. Arab-Muslim preference, when naturalisation does occur, there is a strong preference for those of Arab origin, those who have provided exceptional service to the state. And then in South Asia, it's religious and civilizational identity. So here it's often tied to the religious history of the subcontinent, but maybe that tells you tribal as well, India, the Citizenship Amendment Act is a clear ethnocentric policy. It fast-tracks citizenship for Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, Jains, Parsis and Christians from neighbouring Muslim-majority countries. It explicitly excludes Muslims, defining the Indian state as a refuge for specific civilizational minorities. Bhutan follows a policy of gross national happiness that includes strict cultural preservation. So we were seeing some good PR in Bhutan recently. They want happiness is one of their indexes for the people, and here we're saying it's got strict cultural preservation as well. It has some of the world's most rigorous requirements for citizenship, focusing on ethnic Nepalese, and we've got a lot of Nepalese over in Britain, versus ethnic Bhutanese divide, which led to mass expulsions in the 1990s to maintain ethnic homogeneity. The Maldives, well, it's so small. A non-Muslim cannot become a citizen. And then we've got Africa, indigenous protection and two-tier citizenship. In Africa, ethnocentrism often arises from post-colonial attempts to prioritise indigenous populations over immigrant groups like the Lebanese in West Africa or Indians in East Africa. In Liberia, the Liberian Constitution, Article 27, limits citizenship to persons who are Negroes or of Negro descent. This is one of the few remaining race-based citizenship laws in the world, designed to protect the country's identity as a republic for freed slaves. Democratic Republic of Congo, the law requires that for a person to be a citizen by origin, they must belong to an ethnic group whose members resided on the territory at the time of independence in 1960. This creates a native versus settler dynamic that has historically marginalised groups like the Banyamulenge. I wonder if we've got a lot of that group in Britain, plus the top tier Congolese as well, because Labcon take in both of them, usually if there's a civil war between two groups, Labcon takes them both in. Sierra Leone, similar to Liberia, Sierra Leone has historically restricted citizenship to those of Negro African descent, though they have recently introduced investment pathways in 2026 to bypass these barriers for the wealthy. And here's a look at Bangladesh. I mean, we could look at any country, if there's anyone in Britain speaking about how bad the Brits are or whatever, or criticising Jim Ratcliffe, if they maybe love a country overseas and maybe they only have one flag in their house and it's a flag of another country, we can look at that country's immigration and asylum policy, So Bangladesh immigration and asylum policies are deeply rooted in an ethno-nationalist framework. The state's identity has historically fluctuated between Bengali, the ethnic linguistic, and Bangladeshi, the territorial religious, creating a complex environment for those who do not fit the majority profile. So the policy area: national identity, ethnocentric focus, linguistic, ethnic. The Constitution defines the nation as Bengali, but the citizens as Bangladeshi, effectively centering ethnic Bengalis as the core of the state. So it sounds like Bengalis are the top tier in Bangladesh, but I don't know. Status in 2026, permanent. Citizenship is patrilineal, blood. So even if you're born there, it doesn't mean that you're going to become a citizen. Citizenship is primarily granted via blood. Birth in the territory does not guarantee citizenship unless a parent is a citizen, and that's strict. And asylum, for example, the Rohingya, exclusionary. Rohingya refugees are classified as forcibly displaced Myanmar nationals to avoid granting refugee legal status or a path to citizenship. And that's an ongoing crisis in Bangladesh, apparently. Minority status. I wonder if Britain will end up with a lot of Rohingya. Indigenous rights. The state historically prioritised Bengali settlers in regions like the Chittagong Hill Tracts, displacing indigenous non-Bengali groups, and that's contentious. And I need to read more of this myself, but apparently you've got the Bengali versus the Bangladeshi divide. In East London, they'll know, the Aspire Party voters will know all about this, but we, as Brits, other Brits, and they're British as well, we don't know about all this, So, ethnocentrism in Bangladesh is literally written into the Constitution. Article 6. This article creates a dual identity. While Bangladeshi is the civic label, the Bengali identity is the nationalistic soul. Gemini finds that this distinction often leaves ethnic minorities, such as the Chakma, Marma, or Urdu-speaking Biharis, feeling like second-class citizens because they are not ethnically Bengali. The 2026 context: recent constitutional reform discussions in late 25 and early 26 have revisited this identity fault line, with indigenous groups pushing for more inclusive language that doesn't prioritise one ethnicity over others. The Rohingya non-citizen policy. Bangladesh currently hosts over 1.2 million Rohingya. That will be a neighbouring country, I guess, or neighbouring peoples. Despite the shared religion, Islam, with the majority, The state's policy is strictly anti-integration. The government refuses to call them refugees, using the term forcibly displaced Myanmar nationals. This is a deliberate legal manoeuvre to ensure they have no claim to residency or citizenship. Policies like the relocation to Basan Char, a remote island, and the fencing of camps in Cox's Bazar illustrate a warehousing approach. As of February 26, the government has intensified calls for repatriation, citing the unsustainable burden on the ethnic Bengali host community. The Buhari president, this is the Urdu speaking president, the most famous example of overcoming ethnocentrism in Bangladesh is the case of the Buharis. For decades, 300,000 Urdu-speaking people were stateless because they were seen as pro-Pakistan during the 71 war, an ethnic political exclusion. It took a 2008 Supreme Court ruling to finally grant them citizenship. This remains the only major instance where a state moved away from an ethnocentric, Bengali-only logic to include a distinct minority group. And apparently, in February 10, 2026, the European Union has added Bangladesh to its list of safe countries of origin. Well, thank goodness. It should have probably been that decades ago, even if it isn't that safe or whatever, but it's taken them up to February the 10th, 26, and this is the EU. The EU now considers Bangladesh generally safe from state-sponsored persecution. This will lead to the fast-tracking and rejection of asylum claims from Bangladeshis in Europe, as they are now viewed as economic migrants rather than people fleeing ethnic or political danger. I wouldn't even call them economic migrants, these people coming in from all over the world. I wouldn't even call them that. They think the countries they're coming to are nice societies, basically. Because I think around the world, the way I view it is, you've got societies where the people want to be nice, and you've got ego societies where it's about the self. And to me, it looks like people move from ego societies to what they regard nice societies. I mean, Europe has terrible winters, it's cold, so does North America. So the only reason we should be moving, in my opinion, is if we're all the same as from cold countries to warm countries, especially beautiful countries. So that's just Bangladesh. I mean, you could use that for any country when someone's talking about this in Britain, and you can look at the country of maybe they love this country, or possibly they love UK. You don't know. We should all love the UK flag. We're all British. But if they have a flag at home that's a different one, and they might love that flag, we can look at the immigration and asylum policy of that country. And another sort of thing that Britain's going to have is, say, in this case, Bangladeshi Brits, are they going to have citizenship and the vote in Bangladesh? So, I just want to look at that, In this case, I'm looking at Bangladesh. I'll look at other countries on a per se basis when somebody said something in Britain or whatever, The short answer is yes, they can, but it's not automatic. To get citizenship and the right to vote, a fourth-generation British Bangladeshi must navigate a specific legal process to prove their Bangladeshi origin. And I've used fourth generation here just to show you how far back it can go, I mean, we probably do have some fifth generation Bangladeshi. This all started in 1948, this new experiment. It's never been tried before in humanity. Unasked experiment, it just happened, and we didn't have a referendum. Labour and Tory said, we'll take care of it, we'll do what's best for Britain. Vote for us. We didn't get a referendum. As of February 26, following the historic elections and constitutional referendums held this month, here's a breakdown. The blood connection apparently for Bangladesh. Bangladesh follows the principle of the right of blood. As long as you can prove a direct line of descent to a person who was a Bangladeshi citizen, you are eligible for citizenship. For a fourth generation Brit, this means showing a paper trail, you, your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents. I mean, are they saying, I think they're saying here, this as if your parents and grandparents aren't blood, or, well, one of them's got to be somehow, but possibly their parents are going to be anyway, are going to qualify for this, even if they're fourth generation, we don't know. So the document, you must apply for a dual nationality certificate. This is your sovereign proof of citizenship. You will need your UK birth certificate showing parents' names and your parents' or grandparents' Bangladeshi passports, NIDs, or 17-digit digital birth certificates. And then on to voting right. The national identity thing is the key. Simply having a no visa requirement. So these people don't need a visa if they've got the national identity document or whatever. Stamping your British passport does not allow you to vote. You need a national ID card or whatever. To vote in Bangladesh, you must be registered on the electoral roll and possess a national ID card. Since 2024, the Bangladesh Election Commission has made it easier for the diaspora to register for NIDs through high commissions in the UK, London, Birmingham, Manchester. In February 2026 national elections, for the first time in history, Bangladesh implemented postal voting for approximately 15 million overseas workers and citizens. So that's, I think citizens, I'm talking about, is it fourth generation British here? However, to use this, you must already have been registered as a voter with a valid NID. And can you run for office? Under Article 66 of the Constitution, dual citizens are generally disqualified from contesting parliamentary elections, and we saw that in Pakistan where Anas Sarwar's dad, Anas Sarwar was the Scottish Labour leader. His dad was the first Muslim MP in Britain in 1997. He gave up his British citizenship to be appointed a governor in Pakistan. He's been in 3 parties since then, 3 different parties. He wasn't elected, he was appointed. So it looks like maybe that's the same here, I don't know. I thought there was one from the Aspire party in London who was standing. The 2026 conflict leading up to the 26 elections, this was a major flashpoint apparently. Many candidates were disqualified for holding dual nationality, with the courts ruling that a split allegiance is ethically problematic for lawmakers. And I'm just looking at this briefly for now. Apparently for an MP you can't run, I don't know, but I think you can vote. The system is designed to be inclusive of the bloodline, but exclusive of outsiders. A fourth generation ethnic Bengali is welcomed back with full property and voting rights because they are seen as part of the, quote, Bengali family, whereas a non-ethnic person born in Bangladesh, like a Rohingya or a foreign expat, has almost zero path to these same rights. And the Aspire party in London, which is, I think a lot of them used to be Labour councillors. I think most of them have Bengali names and love Bangladesh probably. If they have a flag, it's probably the Bangladesh one. They're East Londoners. They're the East Enders apparently. But I think 2 of them stood in the Bangladesh election. So it has been so let's see. In London, that multiple councillors from the Aspire party, led by a Tower Hamlets mayor, Lutfur Rahman, who was in the Labour Party but got removed, stood as candidates in the February 12, 26 Bangladesh general election. While I cannot confirm the final local results for every individual seat, this is Gemini talking, several prominent Aspire figures were confirmed candidates for the Bangladesh Nationalist Party. The most high-profile instances involved councillors from the London borough of Tower Hamlets. So Tower Hamlets has got candidates standing in the Bangladesh general election, it seems. Councillor Sabina Khan from Mile End, a member of the London Aspire Party, who served as a key scrutiny head in Tower Hamlets. She stood as a candidate in Bangladesh for a seat in the Golapingo division, Sylhet. Yeah, apparently a lot of Bangladeshis in Britain come from Sylhet. Her candidacy sparked a significant backlash in the UK, with calls for her resignation from the council due to concerns that she was receiving a UK taxpayer-funded allowance while campaigning in another country. And we've got Councillor Ohid Ahmed for representative for Lansbury. A senior member of Aspire and a former deputy mayor to Lutfur Rahman, he also campaigned for a seat under the Bangladeshi Party banner. He publicly stated he would not seek re-election to his London Council seat in May 26 to focus on his political career in Bangladesh. And apparently Labour's UK, the Communities Secretary, so this is the government, Steve Reid, described the situation as appalling, arguing that councillors should focus on their local constituents. However, UK law does not automatically disqualify a person from being a councillor simply for running for office abroad. In Bangladesh, the 26th election followed the July Revolution and the ousting of Sheikh Hasina. The Bangladesh Party, which these councillors represented, won a landslide victory, securing over 200 seats. The citizenship hurdle, as Jim and I mentioned previously, Bangladeshi law generally requires a candidate to be a citizen and not hold dual allegiance. Many of these British-based candidates had to navigate complex legal filings regarding their citizenship status to be eligible to stand for the National Parliament. Just looking at... And finally, just looking at, well, I called him Radcliffe here. It's Ratcliffe, Jim Ratcliffe. Wealth, was he lucky? That's meant to say. Jim Ratcliffe's wealth is as massive as it is controversial. He's worth about 17.5 billion, well, 14 billion pounds, though the figure fluctuates with his chemical empire, INEOS. As to whether he is lucky, the answer is a mix of high-stakes gambling, perfect timing, and aggressive strategy. So to me, it looks as if he was a bit of a gambler, you know, in general terms. And I feel I'm on safe ground here when I talk about this. It's okay to talk about Jim Ratcliffe, you know. The left, oh, let me talk about that, the woke, Keir Starmer, etc. It's okay. The wealth, how he made it. Ratcliffe didn't inherit his money. He grew up in a council house in Failsworth, Greater Manchester. He is often called a late bloomer because he didn't start his first business until his 40s. The buyout king. His strategy was simple but incredibly risky. So there you go. He bought unwanted or unfashionable chemical plants from giants like BP and ICI using massive amounts of debt, leverage. And I should say that he has a university degree in chemical engineering or something as well. So I respect for him for that, you know. Anyone who gets a degree on a STEM, you could say I've got great respect for, just on that alone. The INEOS machine. He founded INEOS in 1998. By cutting costs and focusing on efficiency, he turned these struggling plants into cash cows. Diversification. Beyond chemicals, he owns a significant stake in Man United, the INEOS Britannia sailing team, and the INEOS Grenadiers cycling team. But I think they're probably drains on his money, and he does that for hobbies because he's got too much money. Basically, that's what he's saying when he's got all these. I've got far too much money, but I don't want it to go to the elected governments. You know, I don't want it to go to what the government reckons we could do to make us a stable society, etc., and for infrastructure and that. Was he lucky? In business, luck is often where preparation meets opportunity. Ratcliffe had plenty of both, and Nigel Farage calls these the risk takers. You know, Nigel's all for risk taking, apart from you're the bottom of the rung, because risk takers need people to do the mundane jobs, poor paying jobs, you know. So the poor aren't to be risk takers. There's no help for you. There's no start-up funds or people giving you ideas, etc. Either you're going to have a start-up fund or a rich parents or whatever. So anyway, the good luck. The shale gas boom. INEOS benefited immensely from the US shale gas revolution. Ratcliffe was one of the first to ship cheap US ethane to Europe to keep his plants running when local gas prices were soaring. So he had that luck. the shale gas boom in the US, which made the US totally independent for fossil fuels, really, I think, or for gas anyway. Um, whereas we're dependent on Saudi Arabia, etc., and on the international market, which is set by OPEC, etc. So the unwanted asset market, he started buying his buying spree at a time when major oil companies were desperate to exit the chemical sector, allowing him to buy assets at bargain prices. And the bad luck and survival, the 2008 financial crash, Ratcliffe nearly lost everything. So there we go, he nearly lost everything. INEOS was drowning in debt just as the global economy had collapsed. He had to engage in a brutal, high-stakes standoff with his banks to restructure his loans. Many would say it wasn't luck that saved him here, but sheer ruthlessness and nerves of steel. Here's a summary. Education. Crucial. He combined chemical engineering with an MBA from London Business School. So I've got total respect for him on that. Timing. Very lucky. He entered the market when assets were cheap and debt was easy to get. So there you go, he was gambling really. Risk tolerance, well, maybe not, maybe he saw, but it was a gamble. Risk tolerance, extreme. He bet the farm on deals that would have bankrupted most people. And resilience, high. He survived the 2008 crash and multiple industrial disputes. While he certainly benefited from favourable market shifts, his wealth is largely attributed to a vulture capitalist mindset, finding value in things others had given up on. So some will see him as a hero for that. I mean, personally, I don't know. And personally, I don't think anyone should have over $1 billion in wealth anyway. So I'm just looking at his political affiliations. It seems mostly he was sort of Tory in the past, but relationship with major parties. Labour. In 24, Ratcliffe actually backed Keir Starmer, stating he believed Starmer would do a very good job and that the country needed a change after years of Tory rule. However, that honeymoon period has clearly ended. Well, we don't know that actually, with the recent public spat over his immigration comments. I mean, Keir made similar sort of comments and then backtracked, so historically he was a supporter of the Tory party's business-friendly policies. However, he became a fierce critic of their handling of the economy and Brexit. Despite being a vocal Brexiteer himself, he famously moved his tax residency to Monaco in 2020, which many saw as a protest against UK tax levels. And with Reform UK, while he recently stated he would not donate money to Reform, he has praised Nigel Farage as an intelligent man with good intentions. Personally, it sounds to me like he's going to go towards Reform. I only vote Reform on immigration as an Overton window shift, and I would vote Advance UK just continually as an Overton window shift. I mean, I think we should look maybe at South Asia and Africa on their immigration and asylum policies, and have a think about it, So, Jim Ratcliffe, political beliefs, shale gas and fracking. He is a massive proponent of fracking in the UK to lower energy costs. And anti-green taxes, he often argues that net zero targets and carbon taxes are deindustrialising Europe. And Brexit, he was a high-profile supporter of the Vote Leave campaign, though he has since criticised the way the exit was managed. Anyway, that's two key points. Well, the first one's the main point for me. We should be discussing immigration. It is literally, we're not allowed to say the obvious. It's like is a duck, that sort of thing. We're not allowed to say anymore. I mean, if Britain is going to change, the far left are acting as if saying so is a bad thing, and Keir Starmer is as well. He said, what is wrong with what he said? If Britain's going to change, you should be promoting it, Well, they do, but they don't actually call it what it is, It's, I mean, The immigration after 1948 is completely different to before because this is long distance, unnatural from lots of different countries. It's not even just one group invading or whatever. Um, but at the moment, you're not really allowed to be anxious about it or anything. You, they even tell you Reform are pretty soft in it, but to vote Reform, they say Reform are the R word, but not their voters, apparently. Apparently, the likes of Labour and SNP won't say their voters are the R word, even though they're voting for Reform. So that doesn't even make sense, if you think that way. Personally, I think all you can do at the moment is vote Reform as a referendum vote. Treat every election as a referendum. I think we should have a referendum on it, although we might lose it now, unfortunately. And also a single issue party on this. We had the Brexit Party in 2019, who was basically just a protest party. We should have that. And yeah, this is the sort of situation we're in where we can't even talk about things in Britain, the home of free speech. So yeah, it's getting. But at least, thank goodness, we've got Nigel Farage, the next Prime Minister, who his bank closed his account for political beliefs only about 2 years ago. And a year ago, after the Southport tragedy, Nigel Farage was asked on GB News, is he worried that he might be arrested for X posts he's done? And he said yes, and he was quite right to say that, because he could be arrested for things because we live in a woke Stasi state, police state. It's getting a bit softer now. I think Shabana Mahmood, as Home Secretary, has just said don't do as many arrests on that now. I don't know how that'll work out in practice. But yeah, that's just the situation we're in, okay?